This is an Arctic Cat 550, and we're going to go over what it takes to replace a stator on this. So this will be identical to all the 550s, the 650s, and the 700 motors. So in this case, the customer was stating that it was not charging the battery. He replaced the voltage regulator and still didn't do it. Now that the footwell is off, we're going to pull this cover off. First, we'll pull this little cover. This just covers the little flywheel bolt. So your water pump's down here. You do not need to drain the water or the coolant out of this system. This will unbolt and it will stay sealed up. And we're also going to remove the shifting linkage there, and then basically these Torx head bolts all the way around the stator cover. On the water pump, there's two long bolts, one there, one right there. Pull these out and get a little pry bar from the backside, and this will, there's just kind of an O-ring seal in there, and it'll pop out, but it'll keep the water pump sealed up. So this is the water pump assembly, and it just got a shaft with a slot and groove. And that will line back up in there. As long as you don't turn the motor over, this will pop right back to where it's supposed to be. So I did not drain the oil on this. You don't need to, you can. Either way, it's gonna make a mess when you pull this cover off. There's always some residual oil in there that drips. So I'll just have a drip pan ready. So next step is we'll pop this shift linkage off, and then we'll zip all the screws off around and then pull this cover off. Now these screws are all removed. This cover should come off. It's always kind of stuck on there. So usually what I'll do is this point right here, I'll get a punch from the backside, tap on it, and pop it loose. So from right this side back here, sneak a punch in right back up there, right there, tap on it, and it should pop loose. Also disconnect the stator wire and this other 2-wire here, that's for your pickup coil. Remove those two so that this is free when you pull the cover. This cover's popped loose. Let's take it off. And there's our stator right there. Sometimes when you pull this cover off, these starter reduction gears, they just sit on these shafts and they just press into these embossments. Sometimes they will transfer to one side or the other, be mix match. So I'll just set it here for a second so you can see the orientation. So starter gear, first reduction, second reduction, and then this little aluminum shaft or collar right there goes on that bottom reduction gear. And then sometimes, most of the time, this shifter gear stays in the case. So when we put this back together, we're going to put this back in and then clock it off the timing marks. But then to remove the stator, basically just the Torx screws there, and then a couple for the pickup coil, and then another one right there, and then that's it. So this is my new stator sitting down inside there. One thing to note is where the wires go right down there, there's this little retainer piece. It drops down there like that and pushes and holds those wires down below so it doesn't get caught by the flywheel. Other than that, put everything back the way it was. Final step for inside assembly is to pop this little shift shaft off. There's also a washer right there that's going to go back on there. I'm gonna drop that. So on this gear, it's going to go in right there. But you'll see on that sprocket there's an H1 and an H2. All the 650s, 550s, and 700, H1, the single cylinders are the H1. H2 was a 650 Kawasaki motor. Sorry, the H2 is for the 1000, like twin cylinder engine. But basically what we need to do is, if you look on this sprocket right there, you see the little dent, the little tiny mark there. That mark has got to line up with the H1 right there, and that makes sure that our shifter linkage will actuate the way that it's supposed to. So let's line that up. You can see my timing mark right there is going to mesh up with the H1 symbol. So that's timed the way it's supposed to. So we can reinstall the stator cover back on there and plug everything back in. After everything's reinstalled and topped back off with oil, it's time to check, make sure that we're charging our batteries. We'll start this thing up here, and then we'll just check for some voltage. So we're charging at 14 volts at idle. That's great.